I am grateful to Anna and to Rick. Anna from Conservation Minnesota and Rick from the Sierra Club, both wonderful activists and justice leaders and community thinkers and doers here in Rochester and beyond. Grateful for you joining us tonight and look forward to the conversation. I'm also grateful to serve in the role of Ministry of Tech and waiting rooms and logistics. So glad to help in that way. But before we begin, I'd just like to take a moment, take a breath, and I'll light this chalice here. And think about all that we're holding in our hearts these days. This election, this pandemic, and so many things in our state and in our country and our world, in addition to our own personal lives. And try to remember how much, in the midst of the mess, how much love there is and work, good work that's happening, and legacies and histories of justice and liberation, right alongside all of the other hard histories, and how it's those things that have carried us here and hopefully will continue to carry us. I want to open with these words and then turn it over to our guests. I hope some of you are likely familiar with this poem. If you're not, I invite you to become familiar with it if you haven't heard it yet. It's Wendell Berry, one of my favorite, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. I know many of you have been trying to find time to rest in the grace of the world, even as it turns to snow. And I hope you're finding ways to nourish your spirit in these days. So I'm going to turn it over now to Anna. And I've asked Anna and Rick both to do a little introduction, overview of the work their organizations are doing and what they find critical right now. And then after they've both had a chance to speak, 2 minutes uninterrupted, just kidding, as long as they'd like to speak, then we'll open it up for conversation and questions and end it around 7:15-ish or so. But I'll turn it over to you, Anna, to begin.
Well, thank you, Luke, for that reading. Especially didn't know that I needed that one today, but boy did I. Maybe every day. It's really nice to be back with this group. It's been, I think the last time I saw some of your faces was January, before all of this madness. And we are living in such a vastly different world. But I was happy to be with you then, and I'm happy to be with you now. So my background personally, I did my undergraduate in history and music, and then found my way to politics, and then had to retire from there because I had one ulcer and I was still in my 30s, and I thought, well, this can't last. I can't sustain this. So I've started working it's been 6 years and some now for Conservation Minnesota, doing environmental advocacy and policy work for them here in southern Minnesota. And, you know, our organization has grown a lot over the years. It started relatively small and was part of sort of a consortium of other environmental groups, but as some have found mixed successes and not, and have dissolved, we have absorbed parts of other groups, and certainly the expertise and the lessons that they were learning and the good work that they've been doing. So we're part of several coalitions now as a result. But our work focuses a lot, and has in the last few years, on renewable energy and access to clean water, and what we're doing here in our state with that. We have a couple of different parts of our platform. Obviously, I'll get to the full justice piece of this later, but one of the unique issues that we took on early was a toxic chemicals initiative that was part of a healthy legacy group here in the Minnesota. It was addressing the idea of the number of household toxic chemicals our children and ourselves we were coming into contact with every day. And we noticed that those numbers and those exposures were exponentially higher in people, disenfranchised communities, communities of color, and people of a lower socioeconomic status. And so we really worked hard on some of these initiatives to try and bring together the understanding that there's our natural world and there's the environment there, but then there's our living environment too, and our home environment. And a significant win for us a couple of years ago and for the movement in getting, in partnership with the firefighters, some legislation passed banning flame retardants and things like that that are just in our furniture that become airborne every day in our lives, and we realize what we're inhaling. So there's that. And then obviously, when we, as an organization, I think we are with a lot of others in realizing that while we have been doing the good work, we've also been taking too much ownership over it, and maybe not enough ownership for how it got to this point to begin with. My undergraduate thesis was actually on the hunting and fishing rights of the Ojibwe of Minnesota, and how we legally wrapped them up in language that was binding and restrictive for our own purposes. And it was now, I'm not going to say how many years later, but almost, we're past a decade since I wrote that, and how much more to the forefront some of that is coming. Think of it every time I hear about issues with walleye keep up on Lake Mille Lacs and the ecology there. And that was what I was talking about back in 2004. So we, like I said, like other environmental organizations, have been doing some really hard work, especially in the last couple of years, really digging into some of our own implicit bias, the language we've used, the ways we have tried to craft our message around the idea that all Minnesotans have had the same experience, or that we all view the state and our natural resources the same way, that we've all had the same access to them and privilege, certainly. And then we are trying to reframe the way we work. We have this motto that we've gone back and forth on so many times, is protecting the Minnesota you love. And every time we have a major board strategy or meeting or a staff meeting, it always comes up, well, shouldn't it be the Minnesota we love? And we've rejected that language over and over. I feeling at some level, before we were really taking a hard look at this, that when we say we, it takes away the individual voices of people who may be appreciating and connecting to our natural resources here in a different way than I, you, sort of our white heteronormative folks have been. And so, like I said, we've been doing some good work with some terrific consultants the last couple of years with our staff and with our board. We have just recently put out our first job posting that has been fully vetted through our diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice lens, so that we are trying to attract to our team people from diverse backgrounds and let them know that the experience that they're bringing to the table is valued. And so a lot of that is transparency. A lot of it is that good hard look in the mirror every day for all of us, but also recognizing that it's not a Minnesota urban issue only. There are pockets of people of color and of different backgrounds all over the state who would like to have the same representation at the state legislature and as we're making policies as everyone else. So that kind of leads into this evening. I will throw it over to Rick to follow up on whatever all that was. But very happy to be with you tonight and looking forward to the conversation and questions and things.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. So my name's Rick. I use he, him pronouns, and I work for the Sierra Club here in Rochester. So many things I want to say to start. First of all, one of my great pleasures are seeing the yellow UU t-shirts at different events around town. Y'all are always showing up to do the activism and to kind of to walk out your values, and living and getting to do this work in a city where there's people like you who are committed to having these public expressions of your values makes all the difference. Some folks on the call tonight, like John and Anna, I know quite well and have like honestly helped teach me how to do the job that I'm supposed to do here. And some of you I don't know very well at all, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to acquaint this way. One last thing, if you want to know me, another Wendell Berry poem, if you haven't come across it, is called Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. I came across that in college and I tend to read it every couple of months. It gets me real fired up. So it's a poem recommendation. So a little bit about the Sierra Club and Rick and the stuff we do here in town and around the state. I think I have screen sharing. Yeah, I'll show you some pictures and whatnot on the screen in just a second. So Sierra Club, we like to call ourselves the country's oldest, largest, most influential grassroots environmental advocacy organization. So we started way back when. John Muir, an environmentalist some folks have heard of, Teddy Roosevelt, the president some folks have heard of, starting the national parks. That was kind of the first big thing that we did. Since then, there's been a lot of growth and mutations. As Anna noted with her organization, our organization has really gone through I guess in a church setting, I might say a come to Jesus moment several times, but how like even starting the national parks, a lot of these national parks were started right after the US Army had a battle with Native folks and then claimed their land so that largely white and wealthy United States citizens could enjoy it instead. So we've been really grappling with that, especially in our work here in Minnesota. Some of our headline work that you might see in the news is challenging pipelines that are coming across state land. So we're backers of the lawsuits that are trying to stop Line 3 and Dakota Access Pipeline. And in order to do that work well, we've had to really wrestle with how we've been part of the problem, right? If Native communities had more political power, they wouldn't be the targets for these pipelines to cross their lands and threaten their water rights. Let's see, so other things. So in the 90s, we had a big shift as the Sierra Club. Our mission is explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. And we've been doing pretty good at exploring and enjoying. But increasingly, we realized that protecting had to be more than just getting handshake deals from presidents to establish national parks. But we also had to care about things like regulations and polluted waterways and polluted air, and particularly how the effects of those pollutions tended to land on the backs of people of color, cities, Native folks, recent immigrants, while wealthier folks and white folks in the suburbs and in the richer part of cities tended to enjoy all the benefits without experiencing those negative externalities or that injustice. So in 1996, we started fighting a coal power plant in Chicago. And that was the very first coal-fired power plant, as far as my research or the Sierra Club's research finds, that was shut down because of public demand. So we worked with community members in order to have a voice in their government, to have a voice in the regulatory authorities, to have a voice in their utility to say, hey, we can't be having all this childhood asthma and cancer and just like all this you could identify where the coal plant was through epidemiology maps without even seeing the lay of the land. So the work I do in Rochester and in Minnesota is a direct outgrowth of that. So we got pretty good at fighting coal plants. To date, more than half the coal plants in the United States have either been shut down or have a near-term shutdown date. And in Minnesota, I think there's, Anna, you might know, or John, you might know, that I think there's just like one left without a near-term retirement date. The one that serves Rochester, just this year, it was announced that it will be turning off by 2031, I believe. So my work has largely been to work with people like Anna and John to build political will in Rochester, not only to get us off of fossil fuels, but to move us towards 100% renewable energy. So this is where I would like to share my screen, because we are well on the way. All right. let's see. That's the email that Luke sent me. But I want to show you some pictures, starting with, nope, this one. So I don't know if anyone here was in this picture, but this was about a year or two ago. It was about 40, 50 people went to City Hall to say, we want 100% renewable energy, and we got it. So as of 2031, Rochester will be powered by net 100% renewable energy. And that's because of 4 or 5 years, at least since I was around, I know it was going on before I got here, of regular people going to the utility board, going to city council saying, we need to do this, and pressing through, getting laughed out of rooms to say there are big things at stake. So Sierra Club's philosophy is that we don't just lobby folks, we build power. So the way we build power is by talking to each one of these people in the picture over years, helping them understand the issues, helping them understand how they can be powerful by standing together with their neighbors. We work with other groups. So this is something from a couple months ago. This is Anjali. She's a leader in the climate strike movement. This is, well, Heidi and Kamau. They started Rochester for Justice. This is Barbara, who leads the NAACP here in town. Wale, who was on Barbershop Talks. So we're building relationships with other groups in town interested in social issues and justice. These are the climate strike students who marched on City Hall that we worked with. And this is a picture of them doing a die-in inside of City Hall to demonstrate that there's things at stake, that their lives are at stake if we don't start fighting climate change. This is a picture of a Methodist group. They're called the Earth Keepers. They meet here in town and all around Minnesota, Methodists who are trying to figure out how to take powerful action on climate. And these are beloved sisters of St. Francis at Assisi Heights at a climate march a few years ago. Hi, Kelly. These are some med students who came down to that march. And this is Kevin Bright, the Director of Sustainability here at the City of Rochester and DMC. This is Matt, who's a respiratory care therapist. This is yours truly. And this is an epidemiologist that we've all been working together to study the air quality in Rochester. And that led to the city installing about a dozen air quality monitors. This is a live map of air quality monitors here in Rochester. And there's a few yet to come. So with my last minute or 2 minutes, I want to point ahead to the work that we're doing. So I mentioned that Rochester is already committed to 100% renewable energy, but there's a key word, it's net 100% renewable energy. So the current plan is for Rochester to still have gas-fired power plants, but to offset that fossil fuel use by overproducing renewable energy. However, as one of the scenarios to power Rochester over the next 10 years includes building a new gas plant. So looking ahead, one of the fights that we're looking at is making sure that no new gas plants are built to power Rochester, and as part of a larger movement in Minnesota to make sure that the 3 proposed gas plants, that none of the 3 are built, so that the dollars aren't wasted building that infrastructure, and so dollars are used to build the renewable future that we need. So I just wanted to show you this website that we just built out in partnership with a couple other organizations. It looks like this. It's energywecan'tafford.org. We commissioned a study to find out just how expensive it could be for people of Minnesota if we do continue to rely on fracked gas. And I just wanted to scroll down to one picture. Okay, so these are the 3 gas plants. So one that would serve Rochester. We don't know where that might be. One in Becker, and one up here by Duluth and Superior. So we want to just illustrate that it's not just one gas plant that might run part of the time to serve one city, but this is about a statewide effort to move us off. And though one gas plant might not be concerning, 3 new ones when we already have a dozen or so up and running together create a really big problem. And so we are collecting people who want to take action. So all these different, there's different links for different people all around the state and different organizations. The top one is the general one that says, I pledge to fight this stuff. So I'll stop sharing there and end my spiel.
Great, thank you, Rick and Anna, and welcome to a couple others who have joined during that time. Oh, and Anna, welcome to I think there's a child there with you.
There is. I'm never without a 8-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. So this is quieter. Just let her be here, then it's just quieter. So
totally understand. Well, welcome, little one, and thank you for your commitment to climate justice as well. Glad to have some other folks join, and I'm grateful for your overview and the work that you're doing and the thoughtfulness. What I particularly appreciate about the work that you both have shared and continue to do is the intersectionality of it all, understanding how deeply interconnected all issues of justice are around environmentalism, racial justice, economic justice, for our collective well-being. So I'm so grateful for that. And I'd like to open up to either of you if there's other things you want to share first, but also others who have joined here, questions or thoughts or ideas off of what Anna and Rick have shared thus far. You can either type it in the chat, I can watch for that, or you can unmute yourself. Most of you are, I think most of you have been on some coffee hour or group or forum before on Zoom now, after 7 months of this. So you know how to unmute yourself and ask a question too. So I'd like to open up the room for questions, comments to continue the conversation.
I had a question, if you could go into more details about the 2030 thing, and in particular, how they were going to overproduce, especially we live out in the country southwest of Rochester, and there was last year a big pipeline went through to feed new pipelines around the southwest corners of Rochester and so forth. And so it's like, seems like they're to do the growth and to power a power plant over there off of Highway 14, I think, on the west side of Rochester. There's gas coming in more and more. So how do they reconcile that with the 2030 plan?
If anyone else wants to hop in with a more technical understanding, I can answer the best of my knowledge. I'm a religion major, just learning how to do this stuff as I go along. So full disclosure, no environmental thesis for me. So everything is it's all accounting on paper. So they run the fossil fuel X number of hours, X number of units of energy. They run the windmill spin X number of hours, producing X amount of energy. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, a utility can claim 100% if the one number is bigger than the other by enough. The question of how to power Rochester as Rochester grows is a really important one, especially since we have a big hospital that we have to make sure has power so folks don't die when they're getting life-saving care. And that's often an argument that we'll hear as when we're talking about climate change and the need to go renewable is, well, yeah, but what about that one day a year when it's really cold, or what about when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine? Like, don't we need the fossil fuel? And the answer to that is that if we just shut off all the fossil fuel right now and only used windmills and solar panels and batteries, things wouldn't work. But the question is, as we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars to power Rochester over the next 10 years, what do we invest that in? Because the fact of the matter is we can power ourselves without fossil fuels to turn on our lights, but we just have to make the decisions to invest in those things, as opposed to investing in the old way.
Thanks.
Great question, Dave. Thanks, Rick, too. Anna, anything to add to that?
I would just say that none of this will work if we don't go really aggressively at energy efficiency in the next 10 transition years. So that whole net zero is based on some really ambitious energy efficiency work that luckily the utility seems really is committed to doing. And then certainly the city, some of the folks that Rick highlighted, Kevin Bright and others are working really hard to assist that by doing massive education quickly. It's going to be a steep learning curve, I think, for everybody to get there. But it's attainable. And, you know, with any luck, technology will give us a boost in the, you know, the realm of battery storage and other things so that we can make even better decisions than, you know, we're trying to now. But yeah, that energy efficiency piece is a really, really big deal, which I'm sure you know.
So go ahead. So for the transportation sector, with part of the energy for the city of Rochester, how will that be addressed? And that's for either one of you.
I can jump in on that because I have some new information there. I serve on the Rochester Energy Commission, and we currently, as a part of a federal grant last year, got 2 electric buses, and that is part of sort of a pilot project to see how that goes. With that is going to be some infrastructure that the utility needs to come through with for the city for charging purposes. But so far things are looking good, and we kind of held back for a while waiting to see how the Duluth project went, just in terms of addressing the weather issue and cold and all those kinds of things. But the good news is the city seems committed to continuing to only replace existing fleet with electric. There won't be any hybrid in between kind of transition like there may have been a couple of years ago before they got that Duluth study underway. And then as of just this last week, our Energy Commission meeting, the city is looking really strongly at creating, our Energy Commission is looking at putting forward a policy to the city that's consistent with our energy action plan for a full replacement of our city fleet with electric vehicles. So that's massive. Just thinking about Public Works Department and Parks, just those 2 departments alone, that's a really huge transition. In terms of the rest of the city, we are encouraging, obviously the clinic and others to install more electric vehicle charging stations. The city is looking at putting in more infrastructure for that. There's going to be, hopefully this new transportation model that's part of the DMC and the city's transportation plan will help not only discourage or maybe encourage more electric vehicle, biking, walking, hybrid, all those kinds of things, especially to the downtown core. But some of that will also go toward reducing these greenhouse gas emissions goals or working toward those that we have in the energy action plan too. But the biggest pieces are really the bus system, at least from the city's standpoint, and what RPU, you know, currently would be providing for, and then the city's vehicle fleet as well. Those things I know.
Private vehicles, you know, the 50,000 commuters we have coming in. Do we have a plan to address, or is that some of the stuff that has to be compensated for, so you're a net zero by fossil fuel to offset that somehow?
Transportation is outside of RPU's plan, yeah, but the city has its own goals, and then the state has their Clean Cars initiative. That was Governor Walls' initiative, and Conservation Minnesota participates in that coalition as well. And really, I mean, that's one of those things where the idea is that if you let the market drive the demand, then it actually works out fairly well. It's hard not to convince somebody that commute that they're making from however far out would be a lot less expensive if they were doing with an electric vehicle. But a lot of that's availability right now. And so the Clean Cars initiative, which fortunately we have not lost our commissioner who's been driving that yet to any political blowback. With any luck, what we'll have is more places in town, more dealerships in, outside of the metro, especially, that can carry a broad array of electric vehicles to meet people's needs. Right now, it's that they aren't available. People can't test drive them if they don't exist, or if they aren't in their communities to try that, and then meeting a variety of demand in terms of family-sized vehicles and things like that. So it's going to be a combination of things coming together to achieve the state's goals with these local goals. But the nice thing is, in some ways, with the Destination Medical Center ongoing initiative, we're always looking locally at how the state wants, the direction the state wants to go, because that is, where some of the money is coming from. So I think that that's a benefit to the community at this point.
If I could piggyback on that, Phil, good to see you. Super important question. So much of climate change talk really focuses just on electricity generation, but that's only because that's the easiest thing to focus on. As much of an uphill battle as it has been to get a city like Rochester committed to 100% renewable energy, that's only about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. The other buckets are harder to work on, but they're just as, if not more important. And that's transportation and heating and cooling. And the fourth one is agriculture, but we won't talk about that today. So heating and cooling and transportation, if we don't take serious measures to stop emitting greenhouse gases by heating our homes and businesses and driving around, climate change is going to continue largely unabated. So as Kelly could tell you, we have the Sierra Club has a political committee in town that has asked every single person running for office to represent Rochester whether they would support a citywide goal sometime around 2045 of Rochester being having all electric vehicles on the road, of all of Rochester's housing and businesses being heated by electricity instead of fossil fuels. It seems really ambitious, but the reframe I suggest to folks is whether we can afford the consequences if we don't take those big actions.
Do you know, speaking of availability, sorry, go ahead.
Do you know, Rick or Anna, if Rochester's Solar Choice, RPU's Solar Choice program is part of this overall thrust to make Rochester 100% renewable in the foreseeable future? And whether or not that program is going to be expanded?
I can take a quick stab at this. So in the Rochester Public Utilities Infrastructure Plan, as they're thinking about what percentage of renewables make up our energy mix, the Solar Choice program does figure into that. And that's the reason why you don't get the renewable energy credits when you sign up. Instead, those renewable energy credits go to RPU instead. So I know Anna and I were part of a coalition that actually advocated to start that program. And we viewed it as a stepping stone of demonstrating the public will, the public demand for these sorts of things, and also getting the utility a little bit more comfortable using different modes of energy generation and distribution. As of right now, I don't think there's plans to expand it, but I could be a little bit mistaken there.
Just to jump on that quickly, the only issue with expanding is that those credits go to RPU as long as RPU is still a member of SIMPA, because it's technically, SIMPA is the Southern Minnesota Municipal Power Agency. They are our power purchase, they're our provider. So ultimately after 2030, that infrastructure rolls back over to them anyway. And that goes toward their goals, which are getting much better about renewable energy. But the idea for Rochester at this point is that they'd like to be independent of SIMPA's progress and timeline on building out renewables. So that's why some people chose not to opt into that program, because they would only have the benefit for 12 years at the time of sign up, and not, stay in perpetuity, like putting it on your own home or something like that. It's a good, like Rick said, it was a good stepping stone. It was really good, I think, for the utility to see how many people were interested. The same thing was true of the array that was offered, the same program offered in Austin and in St. Peter. And ultimately, I think with any luck, there'll be more development of renewables like at the utility scale of 5 megawatts or more, which is what Simpla's just put in over in Owatonna, that then member cities can be drawing from. The community solar stuff is terrific if you have a setup ultimately like RP may have post 2030 where they own the infrastructure, they own the energy, they're providing it to you at, you know, at that rate of delivery as opposed to being a little more subject to, you know, where things are right now. But if that's any more clear.
Thanks. Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, we were car shopping a little over a year ago, and when we inquired about hybrids and electric vehicles, we were told they are not offered for sale in our area. That was just a little frustrating for us, wondering if there's any possibility that that'll be changing, and if that is strictly the car maker's decision or how that works.
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, the Clean Cars initiative that Governor Walz has put forward would require dealerships to carry more electric vehicles in their inventory. And there would be an incentive for companies to provide more vehicles to the state. At this point, it has been, the argument has been that the market isn't great enough to warrant the I guess the cost or the upfront cost of purchasing electric vehicles or having them on your lot, whatever that is. And then it's been backed up by the idea that we don't have charging infrastructure, especially in greater Minnesota, to support more electric vehicle build out. So there's two components in one. That is that there will be building more infrastructure, more charging stations across all of Minnesota, but especially outside of the metro area. And then this would mandate compliance from dealerships with respect to having more electric vehicle options. Obviously, there's pushback here. So, like I said, we still our commissioner has managed to make it through this latest political cycle of special sessions that involved departmental firings, and is still very strong. Laura Bishop, I should actually use her name, Commissioner Bishop, and is still strongly advocating for this, as are these other groups. But it'll be up to the legislature, most likely in a new composition after the first of the year, to get to the table and decide whether this is something that they can back. But it is a frustrating thing. And what's been great about the work that I've gotten to do, and I don't know where, Rick's gotten into this some too, but locally here, every time there's a great group of local EV fanatics that are more than happy to let you ride their car and see that, get inside and check it all out. And they're regularly holding these sort of new kind of car rallies, I guess, in the style of, I don't know, classic car rallies. And the same thing exists in Mankato and Winona. And so there is great advocacy happening locally. And certainly there have been a few different times where they have had local events where EVs have been showcased, and the hundreds and hundreds of people who show up to try and check these out and to test drive a handful of vehicles. And so the demand is there. It's just getting the supply, which is, like I said, looking more and more like it just needs to be legislated, unfortunately. But we're getting there. We're getting there. Slowly but surely.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Paul. Just a couple of side notes. There's some things, that John shared about Rochester electric vehicles, and Rick Morris in your chat. If you're down at the bottom, you can see these. A couple of websites around fossil gas facts, and then I think the same link probably maybe for Rochester electric vehicles.
And I was just going to point out, Luke, that, did I get unmuted? Yeah. That you can buy a Chevy Bolt in Stewartville, little hometown House Chevrolet is selling them. So I'm assuming that the car dealer in Rochester may sell them as well. So there are some on the market here. But that is one of the frustrating things, is that not every electric vehicle is being sold locally, every type of electric vehicle.
We bought a Prius hybrid, or Prius electric hybrid in Rochester just 2
years ago.
2.5 years ago, out at the Toyota dealer.
The rumor has it that Ford, all of their vehicles are going to be electric going forward. If not, you know, there may be some hybrids, but they're releasing their F-150. So I think car companies certainly are catching on to the idea that people want. The holdup maybe is family size. It's what people use their vehicles for beyond just commuting, and so they're making those adaptations. But I went to test drive a hybrid. That's what I drive. I have 2 hybrids. A Ford hybrid a couple of years ago, and when I bought it, they said that they were trying to clear out as many of their standard vehicles as possible to make room for electric. So, you know, it's a slow production wave, but it's coming. But again, there's that infrastructure piece of having charging stations and making it convenient for people to opt into that. That's a big piece of it too.
If I could hop on the car and transpo thing too. It's very easy to think about the future of transportation in our current paradigm, where we've developed very, we call it auto-centric cities, or car dependent. Our geography has become very car dependent. If you look at old maps of Minnesota railways, you used to be able to hop on a train in Rochester and by a series of connections get to almost any other town on passenger rail. And yet, about a dozen years ago, the Minnesota legislature passed a law that counties can't even talk about a high-speed rail line between Rochester and the Twin Cities. So I think as we think about the future of transportation and mitigating climate change with the transportation sector, we also have to think about the way we design our cities and the infrastructure beyond highways that helps move people to and from different places. And I think we also have to be sober with our analysis of why things are the way they are. Some of the biggest lobbying groups, even in our state legislature, are oil and gas companies, and they rely on us all driving internal combustion engine cars and living in suburban houses and not having good buses and not having good trains and not having walkable communities in order to make their money. So it's, as much as we need new electric vehicles on the market, we also really have to pay attention to really boring things like the Rochester Comprehensive Plan, which says how far the city can expand, whether we can have new single family suburban developments, or whether we build up and more densely in the city core to make it easier for people to live their lives, not being so dependent on a car. So all these things come together in ways, you know, reading the newspaper casually might not really clue you into how much is at stake with whether there's an apartment building or a suburban development, with whether we expand a highway or whether we build a new rail. But these things all work together to inform kind of our community's carbon footprint. And you have some people sitting on this call here that know way more about that stuff than I do. Looking at Phil in particular, who could really clue you into how important these sorts of planning decisions are as well.
Hey, I have a question. With regard to electric cars, how much progress have they made about getting them to actually run and, you know, making sure the battery doesn't fail at like 20 below zero? Because that's been a huge engineering challenge, and this is Minnesota. How are they, have they come up with a way to get around that so people can get to places when it's 40 below in these electric cars?
I'm not an electric car expert, but I hear from the people who are that yes, they've come a long way. And so, you know, like I said, I know about this research by honestly looking at the data that they brought about the buses that we've ordered, or that we're going to be getting, that Duluth tested out, because they thought if they could make it through that climate with those hills and those conditions, that generally cold climates are doable, and they are. It's like anything else, it's come a long way. And from what I understand, battery technology has, you know, had a really, you know, rapid improvement phase, and now they're sort of plateaued. And then they anticipate that with, you know, continued research and continued work, that they'll be able to, you know, more exponential storage power and ability to perform and all those things. But my understanding is that with a few exceptions, folks who live in Minnesota are driving their Teslas and Bolts, the Bolt or the Volt, one of the two, that you didn't used to be able to get here throughout the winter just fine. They wouldn't necessarily, it's just you get fewer miles to the charge, but you're not stranded in the middle of nowhere. This is not, you know, we're not talking about rapid drain or anything like that. So that's all I know, but that link to that Rochester electric vehicles, I bet they could tell you more than you would ever want to know, or maybe all you do want to know about all that.
And if I could piggyback on that, so 1/2 of making electric vehicles work, you know, if we don't want to talk about trains and buses, 1/2 of making electric vehicles work is charging infrastructure as well. So you all might remember the big Volkswagen diesel emissions kerfluffle a few years ago. Minnesota got, I don't know, tens of millions of dollars from that settlement. And a portion of that is being used to fund fast charging stations on our interstate system. So if your electric vehicle poops out halfway between Rochester and Minnesota, in the time it takes you to buy and drink a cup of coffee, you can fill up your car with electricity and then go on your way. I know the mayor here in Rochester has pledged to double the amount of public chargers we have available, which would be like from 2 to 4, but is a very important step. And I know RPU, our Rochester Public Utilities, is working in coordination, I think, with Winona County in order to establish a couple charging stations on that corridor as well.
Nice.
Good, that will help. You know, I've wanted an electric car, or at least a hybrid, for a while now. It's just a matter of affording one, because that's another thing. If we want people to drive electric cars, we've got to bring the costs down. Teslas are kind of expensive, despite being really good.
One thing you should consider is a used electric. There's some that have come off of leases, and they're very affordable. And I did that. I bought a 2006 Highland, Toyota Highlander hybrid, and I am at 185,000 miles on it, and the battery is still doing its job. It's amazing how much life you can have with them. So I've been very pleased. And then I did post a cold weather Mythbuster on YouTube there. So take a look at that one.
Thanks, John. Thanks. Also, we're kind of just over our first stop, but not, you know, we kind of often bleed over a little bit, which is good. If I could just put Anna and Rick on the spot for one last thing, and say if there was one recommendation or one call to action or one invitation you would offer folks, how to get involved either locally, or what to focus on, or what to do so they feel engaged either locally here in Rochester or Minnesota. What's one thing that would come to the top of your head to encourage folks to consider? And either can jump in first.
I'll give Anna the last word, so I'll go first. A lot of environmental activism has focused on individual actions, changing out your light bulbs, making sure your home is energy efficient. And that's really important. However, I would way rather everyone just runs old, stinky, incandescent light bulbs in their homes and goes to one city council meeting a year to say climate change is important and I want you to do something about it. We can switch out every single light bulb in the city of Rochester, And as long as we have a gas-fired power plant that's powering those LED light bulbs, we are still contributing egregiously to climate injustices. But if we take collective action, it doesn't really matter what kind of light bulbs we have. Eventually we'll have programs to incentivize energy efficiency. But if we take collective action so that our political body, which is nothing other than how all of us live together and coordinate living together, if we make decisions on that level, we can do so much more to transform the way we live as global neighbors. So my ask would be, if you go to energywecan'tafford.org, there's a page that says take action. And the first part there, the first link to take action is simply to sign a pledge. And if you do that, I'll get your info. It's like, oh, someone in Olmsted County says they want to pledge to fight. And then from there, I'll invite you. Hey, we're going to city council. Hey, we're going to the utility board. Hey, we're going up to the state house. Make your voice heard. Let's make these big systems-wide changes together.
Okay, I'm gonna cheat and do just a really fast screen share on this, and I should have done this earlier. But right now, I don't know if everyone can see this now. Hopefully. Can you see it? Can we see it? I don't know if anyone, nope, no dice. Okay. Well, my hope was to show you that there is a huge disparity in how we, now can people see it maybe? Yes, okay. So right now in our city, there is a referendum, and I'm not gonna tell you how to vote on it, I'm just gonna let you know there is one, and it's to help fund our parks, but more than our parks, it's about preservation, improvement of air quality and natural resources and access. And this is when we talk about environmental justice. If you look at this table, and this is from just one medical journal, but a research has been done on park use and green space use in communities. And if you look at how parks are used by just these racial demographics, there are certainly more. But then you look at percentage of people who live within a mile or close to the parks versus how they're used. And I draw your attention to the line on white, percentage of people who live within 1 mile radius of a park, 43 of this sample versus only 26 of the next closest and 12 and 19 and on. And so what this referendum is hoping to do, and what the Parks Master Plan moreover is hoping to do, is continue to make the parks in Rochester and the open spaces equitably maintained and improved and located and all of those things. So that was my, that was exactly. But yes, if there's one thing I could ask you to do, it's on the same lines as what Rick is saying, get engaged on this. It doesn't, I'm not going to say how to vote on this, but there is a Parks Master Plan that has identified needs, and some of those needs have to do with the various communities within our community. So attend a park board meeting or respond to their urban forestry survey that's out there that I will pop a link up to. But find ways to, like Rick said, give your feedback locally, because it is appreciated. And so few people engage that you become part of a pretty influential sample of the community for good. So that would be my call to action for right now in the next 2 weeks. Do a little research, read up on the Parks Master Plan and what they hope to do, and all the parts that it can include for food access, which Kelly knows everything about, and certainly beautification of our neighborhoods and addressing all of these environmental indicators that we want to see in our community, that send residents and visitors alike a message that this is a place where we care about people's health overall, their whole lived existence and health. So yeah, that's my plug. Let me find my.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you. Immense gratitude to both you, Anna and Rick. Just a couple logistical notes. Our Wednesday forums are recorded, not for public use, but they're in our weekly e-news or hidden on our website. So if folks want the link for that, let me know. Otherwise, if you read your church e-news, you members, you'll find it there too. I also have collected, and we saved the chat in that. So I'll have all the links folks shared tonight that I can share if you're interested in those too. And we can post those in the comments on the video of the forum where we post those on our website as well. So as we end, take one more breath while you can. And I'm going to quick copy Anna's to make sure I've got it saved. Thank you for that link. One more breath, and I'm going to turn to Gary Snyder for a closing poem entitled For the Children. The rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us. The steep climb of everything going up as we go down. In the next century or the one beyond that, they say, our valleys, pastures, we can meet there in peace if we make it. To climb these coming crests, one word to you and your children. Stay together, learn the flowers, go light. So thanks for being together. Go light, friends. And thanks for all the good work you're doing in the community and beyond. Be well. Thanks again, Rick and Anna, for joining us. Take care.